Thank you, Mr. President. I ask that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, I rise to speak today on an amendment that has great significance for our country. It's about early learning, and they give you the formal name of the amendment just so we have it for the record. The Casey Amendment number 2152, the Strong Start for America's Children Amendment, which is an amendment to the Every Child Achieves Act that will establish a federal-state partnership to provide access to high-quality public pre-kindergarten education for low and moderate income families. We've had a debate, especially over the last couple of days, about our commitment to basic education, so-called elementary and secondary education. And as part of that, I think it's the time to finally, at long last, have a debate about early learning on the floor of the United States Senate. It's been a long time since that has happened. I want to thank folks who have made it possible for us to get to this point, to consider an amendment like this and to have this debate about the larger legislation, but also about this amendment in particular. Senator Alexander, Senator Murray leading the effort to consider the Every Child Achieves Act, but also in particular, I want to again salute Senator Murray for her many years, as you might call it, laboring in the vineyards of early learning, as she has done on so many other issues, working so hard since the first days she's been in the Senate to work on early learning, and also Senator Hirono for her work on this issue as well, and proposing legislation which has come together now after a lot of years of work by a number of us in the Senate into this amendment. So we're grateful for their contribution, and I'd also like to ask unanimous consent to add Senator Booker as a co-sponsor.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Really what this comes down to is something very fundamental, the basic link between learning and earning. If children learn more now or learn more when they're very young, they're going to earn a lot more down the road. They're going to do better in school. They're going to succeed and progress in school in a way that we would hope, no matter where they live, no matter what their circumstances, if we make the commitment to those children. And because of that success and progress in learning, they'll learn more down the road. We know that a higher or a more developed education leads to great success in school and also leads to a better job down the road. This isn't simply a commitment to a child. It certainly is that first and foremost, but it's also a commitment to our long-term economic future. If you want higher wages, and you want better jobs, and you want a growing economy, and you want America not only to compete in a world economy, but out-compete and have the best workforce, the best workers in the world, we've got to make sure we have the best education system. And that starts long before a child gets to first or second grade, and it even starts before they get to kindergarten. That's why we refer to this as pre-K or pre-kindergarten education. So if they learn more now, they're going to earn more later, and we have to make sure that we bear that in mind. As we debate the appropriate role of the federal government to ensure that all students in the nation graduate from high school prepared for college and career, we cannot forget about this basic piece of the puzzle that begins before that child enters even kindergarten. In the short term, students enter kindergarten more prepared and ready for elementary school if we pass legislation like the amendment I'm proposing. Some studies have even shown high-quality early learning can help double a child's cognitive development. High-quality early learning can double a child's cognitive development. In the long term, high-quality early learning, and we want to emphasize high quality. I didn't say just any program or any kind of curriculum. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But high-quality early learning contributes to, among other things, a reduction in the need for special education, number one. Number two, lower juvenile justice rates. Number three, improved health outcomes. Number four, increased high school graduation and college matriculation rates. And then finally, increased self-sufficiency and productivity among families. These aren't just assertions. These are the results of many years of study. I'll turn to the first chart for today. High quality early learning means children, number one, can earn as much as 25% more as adults. So this is where early learning has a direct and substantial correlation to higher wages down the road. Number two, early learning leads to healthier and more productive lives. There is no question about that. Some of the best research on this has been done lately and should be part of the discussion. High quality early learning also leads to children who are less likely to commit a crime. All the data shows that over many years now. Number four, high quality early learning means children are more likely to graduate from high school. We need to get that number up across the country. We hope that that will lead to more young people finishing high school and getting higher education, but that doesn't always mean a 4-year degree. It might mean a 2-year degree. It might mean a community college. It might mean a technical school. But they can't get to a community college or a technical school or any kind of higher education unless they graduate from high school, and we want to make sure that we have programs that do that. So kids learn more now and earn more later. So that's the first reason to do this. It has a positive impact on that child and a substantially positive impact on the economy. Now, the other way to look at this is what would happen in the absence of this kind of commitment, which we don't have right now as a nation. And I think it's a strategic imperative that we have a commitment to early learning. But what happens if we don't? Well, we can spend upwards of $40,000 per inmate on incarcerations, thousands of dollars on drug treatment, special education. Whatever the challenge is, those problems become worse the longer that we don't make this commitment. So that's one option. The other option is spend a fraction of that $40,000 on high-quality preschool and give children the good and smart start they need in life. It's that old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Mr. President, we often have the best testimony from folks in our home state. I wanted to read you one of those pieces of testimony. This is a letter we received. I won't read the whole letter, so I want to refer to a couple of individuals from Pennsylvania. But Heather from southwestern Pennsylvania, she wrote to us talking about her child, and I won't read all of it, but she said, and I'm quoting, talking about the fact that her daughter is enrolled in a high-quality pre-K program. So these are positive testimonials about the impact on a child and on a family. Heather says in pertinent part, and I quote, my daughter has blossomed since starting in PA pre-K counts, in the PA pre-K counts program. She said she loves it. She sings a song. She learns daily and has made lots of friends. Daily she tells us how much she loves her school and her teachers, unquote. It goes on from there. Another letter from Dory, also from the southwestern corner of our state, out near Pittsburgh. She says, and I'm quoting here, our daughter has blossomed since starting in pre-K counts. Having this program available to us has helped us see how our child learns best. She goes on to say, quote, she is just so much more animated and open to learning now. So we get letters like this all the time about the positive impact of early learning, right from the testimony of people directly affected by it. So one other way to look at this is the testimony from families. Another way to look at it, again, is from the data. One of the best authorities on this is Dr. James Heckman, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, who estimates that the return on high-quality early learning is as high as $10 for every $1 we invest. Another study of the Perry Preschool Project in Michigan showed a return of $17 for spending $1. So you spend $1 on early learning, you get $17 in return. This study has been on the record for many years, and unfortunately, some elected officials haven't taken it to heart. The data on return on investment is overwhelming and indisputable. So if we want to measure this in terms of dollars, there's all the evidence in the world. I think the evidence and the testimony from parents is even more persuasive. But if we want to do a dollar comparison, there it is. $17 returned on $1 of investment in early learning. The same research found that children who participated in high-quality early learning earned approximately $25 more per year than those who did not. So study after study, looking at full-day early learning programs across the country, have found a positive impact on the future earnings of participants, and in some cases, I should say, the benefit just from increased wages could be as high as 3.5% per year. So this does have a direct correlation to wages. So my Strong Start amendment would help more than 3 million American children have that opportunity for high-quality early learning and would give them access to those kinds of programs. Just in my home state of Pennsylvania, by the way, a state which has made strides in this direction at the state level. That's the good news. The bad news is they haven't made anywhere near the strides we need to make. We're nowhere near 50% of our children in these kinds of programs. So because of that void or that deficit, the number for Pennsylvania in terms of benefit is high. 93,930 children is the estimate that could benefit from this amendment being enacted into law. And Mr. President, I would ask consent to enter into the record a document entitled 5-Year Estimates of Federal Allotments and the Number of Children Served by Casey Strong Start Amendment.
Without objection.
And just for the record, what that is a list of the dollar amounts that states would receive under this, and they have to choose to participate. But if they did, they would have not just the dollars for it, but the children served. So 3 million across the country, more than almost 94,000 in Pennsylvania. A state like Ohio, 118,760. Even a state that is a very large state that might not have the investment that we would hope. A state like Texas, 299,902 children. Let's just round it off and call it 300,000 children in a big state like Texas would benefit. So this is the benefit in terms of the number of children, and I believe it's long overdue that we made this commitment to our children. Now the state would have to match, so that's why I mentioned at the beginning it's a federal and state partnership. The state match, and we know that if that happens, the full day preschool would be available for 4-year-olds. That's the age category we focus on. 4-year-olds from families earning below 200% of the federal poverty level. So if a family of 4 at 200% is a little less than $49,000 of family income. Now the other thing I mentioned earlier was quality. We don't want to just have programs set up around the country, federal and state partnership, and have a program. That would be nice, but it won't advance the goal of the best possible learning. We want high quality programs. So we insist that the programs are ones that have teachers with high qualifications that are paid comparably to K through 12 teachers. We also would insist that there are rigorous health and safety standards for these programs, small class sizes and low child-to-staff ratios, instruction that is evidence-based and developmentally appropriate. We don't want to just have any curriculum. We want to have the best curriculum that's based upon evidence that it works. And also evidence-based comprehensive services for children. So this amendment acknowledges that high-quality pre-K programs should be inclusive of services for children with disabilities as well, and recognizes the need for increased funding to specifically serve these children in early childhood. There are other aspects of the program that I won't have time for right now, but I wanted to move to the question of, okay, it's a new commitment by the United States of America. Even folks who would say this is a really good idea would say, well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, we have a pay for it. And it's a change in the tax code, which I think a lot of folks would support because of what we've seen over the last couple of years. To pay for this, we would put limits on the ability of American companies to invert and move their tax domicile overseas to reduce their tax liability. That's a long way of saying we would make it more difficult for companies to engage in this so-called inversion strategy, which allows them through a loophole to pay less taxes because they move operations into a smaller company that's foreign-owned. I believe we should make that more difficult for companies to do that. If they want to do it, I don't like when they do this, not many people do like it, we should at least make it a little more difficult. If we make it more difficult for companies to do what we hope they wouldn't, that actually leads to a savings in revenue. And it would make a lot of sense for American companies who believe that they should move overseas to help us pay for early learning. I think that makes all the sense in the world if we're committed to early learning and if we're committed to making sure we can pay for the program. So the amendment itself is paid for by dealing with this loophole or dealing with part of an advantage that companies have. It's an amendment that's supported by nearly 40 national organizations, from unions to parent, education, early learning groups, disability advocacy groups, and civil rights groups. And I would ask unanimous consent, Mr. President, to enter the full list of endorsing organizations into the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, just a couple more points and then I'll move on. Even with these recent gains, according to one of the national groups that track this data, the National Institute of Early Education Research, NIEER, only 4 in 10 American 4-year-olds are enrolled in public pre-K and less than 2 in 10 3-year-olds. So let's just focus on the 4-year-olds. 4 in 10 4-year-olds in these kinds of programs. I don't know how you outcompete the world and have the best workforce in the world and to develop the highest skill level in the world into the future if we don't make that commitment to early learning. I don't know how we get there over time if we're going to continue to talk a good game about early learning and to listen to the testimony of parents, also listen to the testimony of CEOs and business owners who come to us year after year, and in addition to talking to us about taxation or other issues, come to us and say, please, please make an investment in early learning. Some of the biggest companies in Pennsylvania, some of the biggest companies in the world have come to us saying that. So whether it's a CEO or whether it's a parent or whether it's an educator, they all believe we have to finally, at long last, make a commitment to early learning as a nation because it's a strategic economic imperative. Even in Pennsylvania, where I mentioned before we've made some strides over basically the last decade or 15 years, we rank 10th in the amount of state resources invested. That's kind of good news, but not enough. Pennsylvania is still only able to serve less than 10% of all 3 and 4-year-olds in state funding for early learning. So I think at the same time we can make the academic arguments, the arguments by parents and educators and CEOs, we also know that the national data, the polling shows that it's something the American people support as well. The American people understand the vital importance of increased investment in early learning. In a national poll conducted last year by the bipartisan team at Public Opinion Strategies and Hart Research, 64% of Americans believe we should be doing more to ensure that children start kindergarten ready to do their best. Here's just another way to summarize it. Voters say we should be doing more to ensure children start kindergarten ready to do their best. Virtually no one says do less. Those who say we should do more to ensure children start kindergarten ready to learn, ready to do their best, 64%. That's do more. Do enough is 27%. We got to persuade some of those folks in green. But the doing less is only 4%. I don't know who those folks are. I hope I can meet them and talk to them. But the overwhelming majority of Americans say we need to do more to give children the opportunity to be prepared to learn and therefore to have a strong start in their education and down the road to literally earn more when they're working. This support runs across all parties, 55% of Republicans, 63% of independents, 73% of Democrats. When asked about a similar proposal to the one in my amendment, 7 in 10 Americans, including 60% of Republicans, support it. So it has overwhelming support. Mr. President, let me end with the words of folks who know the benefit of these programs already, some of the parents who wrote to us. There are 2 more that I will cite. Let me just find that here. The next set of testimony is from Beth. She's from Washington County, Pennsylvania. She expresses gratitude for the Pennsylvania pre-K program. She said, quote, "My daughter has learned so much. Before she had this program, quote, she couldn't write any of her letters or even recognize them. She's improved so much since the first day of class. It's given her socialization with kids her age." And she goes on to tell how much that means to her family and how much that means to her daughter. And then finally, Megan from the other end of the state, southeastern Pennsylvania in Montgomery County. She says, and I'm just reading in part, that her son, he came into this program, meaning the pre-K program, he came into this program shy and with very little verbal communication. He now talks nonstop and loves learning, unquote. So I've only read you just brief excerpts from letters that we've received. But here's the point. If a child is going to enter a program and by the end of that be curious about learning, that's a huge success. If a child enters a program not knowing her letters and at the end of that she's learning and she's achieving, that's something we can all be positive about. And even the first letter I read, talking about the way that her child would, quote, singing us songs that she learns daily. Whatever it is, whether it's singing or learning letters or reading, these children are learning because of a good program. It just didn't happen by accident. It happened because they're in a high-quality program. It happened because in some communities, they've made the decision to invest in the future of that child and the future of our economy. So let's take a step with this amendment to allow children to learn more now so they can earn more later and help us move into the future in a very positive direction for our children, for our families, and for our economy. Mr. President, I would yield the floor.